Sorry?
Yeah.
Hi, it's Philippa.
Mm-hmm.
That looked to be fine. So I just wanted to let you know that.
Okay.
So our sound levels are good. Everything is good. There's a slight delay in the formatting of the screen, and I'm not sure why that happens, but there you go. All right, so let's start now.
Okay.
Okay. Good to go?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You want me
All
to
right.
just start in, or you can ask me questions?
No. What I'm going to do is first introduce you and introduce the class. We may need to edit this a little bit.
Okay.
Since this is the sort of preamble. So, Terry Monahan, I would like to welcome you to the class on managing editorial offices, which is one of the classes that is being taken by students at the GW program in professional publishing. The goal of this particular lecture is to better understand the skills and tools that editors or people who are managing editorial or publication offices need. Managing here simply means, the tools and skills and understanding that are going to help people keep an operation running smoothly. Thank you very much for being willing to join us and share your wealth of experience and knowledge with this. So I'm wondering if we could start with you giving the students a bit of background about who you are, what you've done, and what you're doing now.
Okay. I'm getting horrible feedback. I'm sorry. We'll have to cut that out. I'll go through.
Okay.
I think I'm not going to use this.
Okay.
Yes, I'd be happy to give a little background on my. That's horrible. Are you getting it too?
Try turning down your volume.
Okay.
Or mute. Right.
Okay, does that help?
I'm fine on this end.
Okay. Yeah, I can hear it, but at least it's not quite so bad.
Okay.
Okay, if you
Oh, you've just hung up.
I've hung up.
No, you're okay. Keep going.
Okay.
This is what it is. So, all right. So let's sort of start again.
Okay.
And edit a point where I hope we'll be able to edit. So, Terry, I hope you might begin by giving us a little bit of background about who you are, what you're doing now, and what you've done previously to set the context for the Q&A that we're going to have.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, Philippa. I'm glad to be here. I began my career in newspapers, actually. I started out of college working in several newspapers, but then decided I liked long-form writing better and went into magazines. And I ended up in scholarly publications because one of my first clients was McGraw-Hill Medical Publications, and I ended up writing a lot of features for them. I eventually joined McGraw-Hill as an editor, a staff editor, and then moved up into editorial management positions at McGraw-Hill, and stayed at McGraw-Hill for about 15 years and working at various levels in executive management there. Then I left McGraw-Hill after about 15 years and started my own company with the general manager of McGraw-Hill. And we did consulting for other publication companies who were expanding, because at the time, right around 1999, 2000, publication companies were just exploding. There were magazines, spin-offs, new titles, expansions, and there was nobody in the Twin Cities where I lived that had the kind of competence that we had to help consult with these companies to develop these products. So we did that for a number of years, very successfully. We launched new journals, we did financial plans, we did training and coaching on the staffs of these different journals and magazines. We did business plans for a whole company. I remember once we actually did a whole proposal for one company on how they could change their whole posture in their business community. That was really fun. We were there for 6 months doing that. And then one of the journals or publications that we launched was under a licensing agreement with one of our clients. And the magazine was the History Channel magazine. That's what we developed. And I was very involved in developing that and finding the market niche for that. And then I wanted to be the editor of it because it was my baby. It was the content that I liked, and it was the subject matter that I liked, and the authors were the kind of authors that I read anyway. So I stayed on as editor of that, even while we were still running our company. And then the History Channel moved the magazine to New York City, and I didn't go with it. But then a couple of years ago, one of my clients was the University of Minnesota, and they wanted to launch their first ever open access online only journal. And it was a brand new thing to them and to me. I'd never heard of them before. And I did that. I launched their journal for them, and it came out in September of 2012. It started publishing. But in the process of doing that, I ran across PLOS, which is the company that I work for now. A very unusual company, launched 10 years ago for reasons that are very unusual now. They were an advocacy organization. They wanted to promote open access publishing. And now they're huge. They're a large publisher. And the journal that I'm the senior editorial manager of is the largest journal in the world.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And how many staff do you have under you now?
There are 30 people on my team. 3 of them are editorial managers. Then 5 more are publications managers. So the three each have teams of their own. And then on their teams, they have junior managers who manage the rest of the staff. So what we call publications assistants, we have about 18 of them now. And they're the junior staff who really run the journal. They're the ones that keep this thing going.
And how many papers do you process on a daily basis at PLOS One?
We get about 200 submissions a day. It's pretty daunting. Just that many papers that have to be touched every single day. Yes.
And what would you say is like the growth rate of journal over the past period of time when you've been there?
I would say the journal itself launched in 2006.
Right.
So we're not that old, and the trajectory is very steep. It went straight up.
So is it doubled in the past two or so years, would
Absolutely.
You say?
Yes,
okay.
I would say yes.
Okay. So you've had a real challenge in managing the office and keeping up with things, I have no doubt.
Yes. We've doubled, in the time I've been there, we've doubled my staff. And that just the recruiting and the interviewing itself was an enormous job.
Wow. So as you and I know, we've gone over sort of briefly in advance a list of questions, and I want to run those down with you now, and feel free to add in stories and perspectives you have from both the huge publisher that you're with now, but also from your experience with smaller publishing offices as well. So one of the things in this course that we're trying to distinguish and sort of get our hands around is people and processes. Mm-hmm. And so if you could talk about, how you see those being separate and how you see them being inseparable in managing an editorial office.
It's very different depending on the publication. Many of your students, I'm sure, will either be on or be joining staffs that may only have a few people, two people. So you are...
Hold on. You're hung up. All right. Could you repeat the last 5 seconds?
Okay. Many of your students will either be on a very small journal or will be joining a very small journal that could be as small as 2 people. The journal that I launched at the University of Minnesota was me. I ran the whole thing.
Yeah.
So many of these journals will operate that way. What that means is that you know every single thing that's happening. You know every person, you know your community, you know your readers very intimately. That's a very different kind of publication than a publication the size of PLOS One, where you have thousands of people who write for you, who do your editing for you, who review for you, and it's difficult to maintain that. It's impossible to maintain that intimacy with them. You try very hard, and customer service is something we talk about every day, and it's something that we look for in our candidates who come in. People who, believe it or not, people who've been baristas at Starbucks, they're, no kidding, they're really high on our list because it means they know how to handle pressure, they know how to handle people, they don't get too rattled, or at least they have experience with people who get rattled, because you do get into situations where people are unhappy, and you have to be able to handle that. The History Channel magazine, that we were a small team, very small team, but I managed all the writers who were freelancers, so I developed relationships with all of them. Again, very different from PLOS One, where you don't have an opportunity to get to know your readers very well, or writers very well, unless they've written more than once or they initiate communication with you.
And what would you say in terms of the processes that you have in place and the documentation of those processes? So you've just talked about working directly with writers, working with, with editors on your staff, their work with authors, also your work with freelancers. All of those relationships have some sort of documentation behind them. That is, I look at that as sort of a fallback. It's like when things aren't quite going right, you go back to a job description, or you go back to a contract. I'm wondering if you can talk again about the role of those written descriptions of roles and responsibilities, and how you can deviate from them when necessary.
With the smaller publications, we did deviate. I would say we did. We had all of the other publications, except the one other open access publication that I worked at, had contracts where the authors would release their rights to the manuscript. But when I was the editor of the publication, because I had been a writer myself, I didn't insist on all rights. I would have the ownership of the article belonged in the hands of the author. On PLOS One and other open access publications, we have what's called the CC BY Gold license, which is the highest open access license. There's several licenses under the Creative Commons rubric, and our licenses allow the authors of the articles to own the articles completely, and that anybody who wants to use the material from the articles is allowed to do that. And we document this very carefully. This is in the submission process that we have, so that the authors who submit to our journal understand and agree to the terms, meaning they're allowing their material to be used freely by anyone in the world. The only thing that they are asked to do, the other users, is assign the source, the original source of the material. That's all they have to do. So we document that very carefully, both on our site in the submission process and in our workflows, so that everybody knows what the terms are at PLOS One. And in the other publications I worked at, those are all in the manuscript process that we have. When a research article would come in, we would send a contract out for a signature, and the contract would stipulate exactly what it was that they were expecting to do. At McGraw-Hill, we bought all rights, so the authors didn't get to keep their rights. This is something I objected to strongly. Didn't win.
Yeah. So just as a small aside, I'm really interested to see if you've seen a change in authors' awareness of their rights over time as open access has grown. I think sometimes, particularly in STM publishing, authors just want to get published, so they'll sign whatever is put in front of them as long as they can get, something to put on their pubs list. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think the authors are very savvy about open access. But of course, the people who come to us understand Creative Commons licensing and all of that, and they agree to it. In fact, many of them come to us because they believe in it. They think it's a wonderful thing. They believe that the scientific community needs to be networked through a vehicle like ours. Yes, they're very savvy. A few times they have declined to share their data or deposit their data, which we do require as well. And when they decline to do that, we just can't publish them, and they're not happy about that. But those are our terms.
Okay, that's great. You talked a little bit in the past about the care and feeding of your editors and your staff. Could you talk a little bit more in terms of both in large and small offices, the importance of really keeping staff happy and how you do that?
Yeah, I can do that. Go ahead.
No, go on.
Okay. I have many experiences with that. For example, in the old print world, I almost feel like there isn't a print magazine world or print journal world anymore, but there is. There was always a tension between the art and layout departments and the editorial department, because editorial always took more time than it should, and the art departments always had to make up the difference, and they still had to make beautiful pages. So in layout, they would feel this tremendous pressure to produce beautiful work with no time.
Right.
So yes, I did a lot of massaging egos in the art departments at various publications that I worked at, because they're talent, they're gifted people, and they shouldn't be treated like the end of the line. And the editors do take advantage of them, and they suffer for it, and we lose people because of that. The editors I've worked with really didn't need that much care and feeding. They are so motivated by their content, and they become such experts in the fields that they're publishing in that they're pleasant to work with. They're self-motivated. They don't need to be managed. And on a larger publication that has more than 2 or 3 people, there are people with specialties within the publication. For example, a departments editor or a features editor or a editorial editor. And they would specialize in these areas and then become the go-to people for everything in that area, both for marketing and advertising and the rest of the staff. The people who need the most care and feeding on PLOS One are everybody, because we have 5,000 academic editors. The academic editors are the ones who do the real content handling of the manuscripts on PLOS One. They're matched to the papers based on their expertise and the paper's content, and then they run the review process. They make the decisions on whether it's acceptable or not.
Just to clarify briefly for the students that these academic editors in the PLOS One model are volunteers.
Yes.
So it's sort of like a very high level managing peer reviewers, so to speak, but it's the model that PLOS One uses to keep its engine running.
And that's true in a lot of scientific journals, that the top editor and the content editors are volunteers. That's part of their intellectual community. They expect to do that in their careers. Because there are so many of them, and because their role is so important, we do whatever we can to make them feel a part of us. We have a discussion forum, online discussion forum, where they can talk to each other. They can talk about the issues that they face. They can complain, and they do. And then we get in there too. Let me help with that. We have people who monitor discussion forum every day, and they offer help and guidance. They make changes because of suggestions we get that through there. But really, all they get from us right now is a mug at the end of the year. And they're doing it for love. They're not doing it for very much recognition. Although we do publish their names with the manuscripts, which is some recognition.
But having some sort of regular feedback between those thousands of academic area editors and your staff, and then responding to high priority problems that they point out, is an important part of your overall operation, would you say?
Absolutely. Yeah, we had an initiative last year where it was the Academic Editor Initiative, and the whole point of it was to develop a new training system so that we could give them the kind of help that they needed to be really good academic editors, to give them feedback, and also to help them understand how other people on the group were doing their work. That has just launched, and it's meeting very positive response from the editors.
Great. Now, something I wanted to ask you about in terms of the editors and that you have on staff, and what you think about their professional development. So I'm just thinking about myself and the staffs that I have worked with in much, much smaller operations than PLOS One. But they have had goals themselves for professional development. So I, over time, have come to change my budget to support their professional development. Their belonging to professional organizations, going to professional meetings, other things like that. And that's affected the way that I've had to structure my budget. And I'm wondering if you could give your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. I have always had in my budgets professional memberships. I have always sent staff members to, especially when I was working in scientific journals, to the societies and the scientific conferences where they could learn more. They were all members of CSE. We actually had booths at various conferences anyway, so many of us would travel to represent the journal at these conferences, but then attend the events at the conferences so that everybody's education could be expanded. People on my staffs have had roles within these organizations where they would be treasurer or other representative functions. And the group I have now, because the three managers who are right one level below me in the reporting line, are all very different in their own ambitions. One is very media-oriented, and one is very tools-oriented. And because of the differences in their own ambitions, I did budget for the three of them to go to different conferences this year.
And then do they come back and report out on?
Oh, absolutely. And that's part of the deal. If you're going to go, you got to come back and do a presentation on it. And nobody likes that part.
They just want to go, absorb, and then move along. One of the things that you and I have talked about before that's really challenging for you at PLOS One, but that you have this wealth of experience that you've been able to bring to keep them afloat is the very complicated workflows and how you train people on them and document them and identify problems that come up. So I'm wondering if you could talk specifically about how you think about workflows, how you represent those workflows, and how you put sort of timestamps on the workflows. So you were talking before about getting materials to production late. And then having a consequence for that. So the workflows and the timing and keeping those in sync are, I think, an important part of keeping an editorial office running smoothly. So I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
Yes, I can speak to that from both sides. For example, the History Channel magazine was fairly large, but it was bi-monthly. And I had an editorial calendar for the entire year. So here's what we're going to do for the entire year.
Mm-hmm.
Once everybody agreed on what the topics would be, what the articles would be, then I went out and I went and found those articles. I found the authors, I got them assigned, I got them in, I got them edited, all of that. I had to handle all of that. That editorial calendar was critical, and the editorial schedule was critical. I delivered that schedule to everybody on the team. They knew when they had to have this article done, this article done, this article done, and it all backed up to me.
Yeah.
It meant I had to have it done first. Go ahead.
No, sorry, go on.
I had to have it done first, and then, but we lived and died by those schedules. If I didn't meet that schedule, then I backed into the next issue, and I was already late on the next issue. And I think of all the publications I ever worked on, that was the only bi-monthly. Everything else was monthly, and it was the most high pressure because those articles were packages with lots of elements in them. They all had to come in. They all had to be managed by one person, me, before they got to the rest of the process. And it was very stressful because we would put that issue to bed. Once it was laid out, I wasn't done. I had to read the proofs. All of that had to be done. Once that was done, all of the next issues should have been in the art department again. As soon as the art department was done, the articles for the next issue needed to be in his hands, and they weren't.
Yeah.
It would be often because I was still involved in the previous issue.
And I'm just wondering about over time how you learned to gauge how much time a process needed. Let's say one article. Mm-hmm. When you came into a new publication and you looked at whatever was there, or you were structuring whatever was there, mm-hmm. How you learned about the time, and then when something didn't work right, when something, obviously the problems come when things are late, what you did and how you communicated with people mm-hmm. in order to try and right that wrong and keep things moving ahead. I mean, the idea, journals have to come out when they have to come out. So mm-hmm. somehow you've got to make it up.
Yeah.
And how do you communicate that and manage that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't manage it. It's very difficult because you're right. With a journal that has a publication schedule, it has a print schedule. You have a print date. The way a print journal or publication works is that you have an agreement with your printer. The printer has lots of other publications. You have a print date. You slot into that date. You miss that date, you may not get printed that week or month even because they've got other publications to handle. So you get down to the wire and you're working nights and weekends if you haven't done it right. But that's a good indication that you do have to look at your processes. Either you really aren't staffed appropriately, or you are adding in work that you don't need to do, or you do need to eliminate some stuff that you do need to do, but you just can't make your schedule with the things you'd like to accomplish.
How do you see electronic publishing as making a difference or changing the scenario in this? First, things like online publishing first, automated XML-based pagination. When you go to a full electronic publication, the bells and whistles of that schedule change. Mm-hmm. And how have those affected your sense of workflow and timing?
It's different depending on the publication. The publication I worked on online before I came to PLOS was very small, mm-hmm. and I managed the whole process, so I could control it. We missed our launch date by months. That was not my responsibility, but we continued to miss our launch date because the editor-in-chief kept tweaking what we were going to launch with. That's a problem. You can't raise expectations for a publication and then not deliver. You really can't do that. But the online process is very interesting because when you're on a place.
Pardon, would you just repeat that? You hung up on this end for about 5 seconds.
Okay. I'll see if I can figure out where
well, that's okay if you can't figure out. You were saying you can't tweak the publications quite in the same way when you've got the electronic processes.
Actually, I think you can. With the electronic publication, I think it's more collaborative with the authors and the editors that you're working with, because you can look at the same thing at the same time, even though you're in distant places.
Right.
In fact, I did a little workshop on working with remote staff, and this was 10 years ago when people didn't have remote staff yet, but now everybody's working with remote staff. It's very easy because you can look at the same pages, you can have conference calls where you can see each other's face. It's very helpful. But working with your journal authors and your journal editors remotely with an online system, you spare yourself introducing errors because you can control what people can change to a degree, and you can get feedback on certain things. You can have a real conversation going on right on the manuscript with notes in the margins, all of that, which is a real benefit, I think, to online publishing.
Do you feel that working with a online-only publisher now, that your requirements for understanding the technology driving the online publishing has grown significantly? How important is it for you? How important is it for the editors working under you at various levels?
It's absolutely critical. The staff who come into PLOS, even if they've worked on an online publication before, have seen nothing yet because it's such a unique online operation where we are, and it's true of all the managers too who did not come up through our system. They're hit blindsided by just the magnitude of our process. It's very critical because every single thing we do from the beginning of the day to the end of the day has to do with online systems. We must have 7 systems that we work with right now. And you have
Can you just tell us what those systems are, just briefly?
Sure. Editorial Manager is our peer review system. We have written all kinds of code on top of it, so it's not like anybody else's Editorial Manager system. There are many other peer review systems out there like it. I really like the one I had before, which was Open Journal Systems. It's an open access and open source system. That's one. We use SharePoint for our I just lost the word, intranet, for our intranet, and that is fairly new. That's not easy to learn. That's very difficult. We use for our communications management because our email system, Outlook, couldn't handle the load. We would break Outlook regularly because the volume of the email communication was so great. So we had to get most of our external communications out of Outlook. So we have then we have a whole bunch of different collaborative software programs: Confluence, Jira, Blackboard, or not Blackboard, Basecamp. Then we have...
And those are all used for internal
and
project
external
development?
Those are all internal, yes. Yeah, those are all internal. Then we use several conferencing systems because we have an office in Cambridge. So online conferencing systems, GoToMeeting. What did we used to use? I forget what the other one was. But yes, we have to learn all of those, and we have to not be afraid to use them. And we don't spend a lot of time on training people how to use them. We just drop them right in there and hope they figure it out pretty quickly.
Wow, that is a lot to cope with.
Mm-hmm.
So we've spent almost, I don't know, more than a half an hour of your time with this. I'm wondering if you could just sort of make some closing remarks again, talking to our students in this class about what are the most important things that they should be aware of and keep their eye on in terms of being really good managers of editorial and publication offices. What are the tools today that they need to be expert in, and what are the characteristics in working with people as well as processes that they should try and nurture in themselves as managers?
Okay. Any tool that you have access to and can learn it, because you'll use it sooner or later. I had to learn Moodle Rooms, which is an online learning an online learning system. I had to learn not just how to use it, but how to develop it, to put material up on that, and to, make it fit with the code. That was very difficult for me. In my early career, we were using paper. It was very different for me to learn that. So if you can get exposed to that early, any of those new software programs, platforms, anything, do it, because you'll use it. Excel is an incredible way to manage your data. I did not give that enough credit when I got here. We would die without Excel, because we have to track how long things are taking, where things are, who's managing different things. We use Google Docs all the time, which are a very simple version of Excel. About the characteristics for managing a staff, I think they're the same for managing any staff. If you have to be approachable, you have to be interested and interesting to your staff. The staff meeting is a wonderful place to foster a fellow feeling that you're in this war together, because sometimes it feels like a war, and that you appreciate the hard work that everybody's doing. If you can express that regularly, then it helps over the bumpy times, because let's face it, editorial pays horribly compared to pretty much any other industry, and the people who are coming into your staffs are not going to make very much money, and they are probably going to have to live 5 people to an apartment just to get their foot into their careers. Yeah. So appreciate them, listen to them, find them ways to stretch themselves. There's always ways to do that. Give them things that are a little outside their reach to do as well, because often they reach that too. Give them projects. We do that a lot at Plus One. Once people have mastered their role, we don't want them to get too set in their ways in that role. We give them projects to do that give them exposure to the rest of the company, and that challenge them especially in terms of being able to present in front of a group. That's a real hard thing for young people to do, but our group is doing gangbusters, and it will take them to their next job and the job after that in real good stead.
That's a wonderful wrap-up. Terry, thank you so much for spending the time to talk with us about this. I'm hoping, as I've described to you before, that we can schedule an online Q&A following this up, but I'll follow up with you on that later.
Okay.
And so, again, many thanks from the classroom. And in that, it is Chinese New Year's. I can say Happy Year of the Horse.
Thank you. Happy Year of the Horse to you as well.
Thanks so much. And I think we'll see you again when we talk about peer review.
Okay.
All right. Thanks so much, Terry. Bye. Bye-bye.